Okay, we've made it to our final step, which is just closing up this gap in the bottom of the bag. There are a couple ways to do it. If you don't mind a small, if you don't mind it showing just a little bit, you can pinch these seams together and just with a very small seam allowance, just edge stitch it shut, and you will get a little bit of a ridge. It'll be on the inside of the bag, so you know, most people won't notice that. If you want to make it invisible, then you do need to hand stitch it. I like to use, I think it's called a ladder stitch, and I will try to demonstrate it. I don't know how helpful it will be, but you can also look up a variety of hand stitches on the internet, and people have all kinds of good diagrams and stuff that can explain it a lot better than I can. Hand stitching is not my forte. I usually avoid it like the plague, but I do usually do it to close up my bags because it's just one of those details that I notice always. So you wanna, so I have my thread matches my lining. I have a knot in one end of it, and I'm going to go, starting at one end, I'm going to go into my seam allowance so that my knot doesn't show. And this is where it's really important to have creased this really nicely. So for the ladder stitch, you're basically taking a small stitch on one side of the seam, and I don't know if you can see this. Take a small stitch on one side of the seam, and then I cross over to the other side of the seam and take a small stitch on that side. So the only little bit of thread that would be visible, you can see I'm really awkward at this. The only little piece of thread that would be visible would be that teeny stitch that's in between the two sides of the seam. And when the seam is lying flat, you almost can't see it at all, which I really like. So I'm just going to take a couple more stitches and then show you what it looks like. So I've taken about 6 stitches, and if I pull it apart, you can see where the stitches are, but when I tighten it up, it's pretty much almost invisible. So that's why this is my preferred step. I'm not going to put you through watching me sew up this whole gap, so I will leave it at this. Thank you so much for joining our sew along. I hope you had a great time. I know I did. And we'll see you back here for our next sew along.